Most 4-year-olds love snack time, but Lily and Logan Ashford haven't eaten a full meal in weeks. The billionaire tech mogul's twins have been wasting away since their mother's sudden passing, refusing every bite, rejecting every plea. 3 highly paid nannies with perfect credentials have failed spectacularly. But when Sophia Martinez, a single mom with no formal training, walks into the Ashford mansion, she doesn't bring charts or meal plans. She brings flour eggs and an idea so simple, it's revolutionary. What happens next will leave their father speechless and prove that sometimes the best medicine comes from the most unexpected places. Stay with us because this story will show you the true power of understanding a child's heart. Alexander Ashford had built his empire on solving impossible problems. His algorithms could predict market trends with 94% accuracy. His apps could connect millions of users across continents. His innovations had revolutionized entire industries and made him one of the youngest billionaires in tech history. But he couldn't solve the most important problem of his life, getting his 4-year-old twins to eat a single bite of food. "They had 3 small bites of toast this morning," reported Mrs. Pemberton, the third nanny in 6 weeks. Her crisp British accent couldn't hide the exhaustion in her voice or the defeat in her shoulders. "That's all they've managed today, Mr. Ashford. 3 bites in 12 hours. Alex rubbed his temples, staring at the barely touched plates scattered across the marble kitchen island. Organic chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs, sweet potato fries cut into perfect strips, fresh fruit arranged into colorful rainbow patterns, all untouched, growing cold like every meal for the past month. The waste was staggering, but the fear was worse. What about the smoothies, the protein shakes? Alex's voice carried the desperate edge of a man watching his children fade away before his eyes. "They dump them in the plants when they think I'm not looking," Mrs. Pemberton admitted with a sigh. "Mr. Ashford, I've been caring for children for 25 years. I've worked with the most challenging cases, children with eating disorders, trauma survivors, even selective mutism. But Lily and Logan..." She trailed off diplomatically, but Alex could fill in the blanks. His children weren't just picky eaters. They weren't going through a phase or testing boundaries like normal 4-year-olds. They were on a silent, determined hunger strike, their young minds somehow convinced that eating meant moving forward, meant accepting a world without their mother. Since Grace's sudden heart attack 3 months ago, the twins had been slowly disappearing before his eyes, their small bodies growing thinner, their bright eyes becoming hollow and distant. "Perhaps it's time to seriously consider hospitalization," Mrs. Pemberton continued gently, her professional mask slipping to reveal genuine concern. "They've lost considerable weight. Dr. Harrison was quite concerned at their last appointment. He mentioned feeding tubes if this continues much longer." "No," Alex's voice was sharp, final. "They're not sick. They're grieving. There has to be another way." "But what way?" The first nanny, Ms. Rodriguez, had tried strict schedules and reward charts, turning every meal into a battlefield of expectations and disappointments. The second, Janet, had attempted bribery with toys and screen time, promising elaborate rewards for every bite consumed. Mrs. Pemberton had brought her decades of experience and gentle coaxing reading, parenting books aloud, and trying every technique known to child psychology. Nothing worked. Nothing even came close to working. Through the massive kitchen window, Alex could see Lily and Logan in the sprawling backyard, sitting motionless on the elaborate swing set Grace had insisted on installing last spring. Children need to play. She'd said, her eyes bright with plans for birthday parties and summer barbecues that would never happen. The twins weren't swinging, hadn't touched those swings since the funeral. They just sat there, 2 small figures in expensive clothes, against the perfectly manicured landscape, looking as lost and empty as he felt. The pediatrician had been blunt during their last visit. "Children can't survive on 3 bites of toast and occasional sips of juice, Mr. Ashford. Their bodies are beginning to consume muscle mass for energy. If this continues for another week, we'll have no choice but to intervene medically." Alex had nodded and written another check for another consultation, but inside panic was eating him alive. He'd lost Grace to something beyond his control. He couldn't lose his children, too, especially not to something as fundamental as eating. "I'm giving my notice, Mr. Ashford," Mrs. Pemberton said quietly, gathering her extensive notes and meal plans into a neat pile. "I'm simply not equipped for this level of complexity, but I've taken the liberty of reviewing some applications for replacement candidates. There's one that might. Well, she's rather different from the usual profiles." Alex barely listened as she gathered her things and prepared her final report. Different. Every nanny claimed to be different, special, uniquely qualified. What he needed wasn't different. What he needed was a miracle. Sofia Martinez had been cleaning office buildings at night and caring for her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, during the day when she spotted the job posting on a community center bulletin board. The salary figure made her look twice, then 3 times. It was more than she made in 4 months at her other jobs combined, enough to catch up on rent, buy Mia new school clothes, maybe even fix the heating in their tiny apartment. The requirements seemed almost too good to be true. No formal childcare experience necessary. Seeking candidate willing to work with challenging circumstances. Patience and creativity essential. Previous experience with grief or trauma helpful but not required. She almost didn't apply. Billionaires didn't hire single mothers from her neighborhood, women who took the bus everywhere and shopped at discount stores. But her 8-year-old daughter Mia had been asking about dance lessons, and their apartment's heating bill was 3 weeks overdue. Sometimes you had to take a leap of faith even when the landing wasn't guaranteed. The Ashford estate was more intimidating than she'd imagined from the address alone. The gates were wrought iron masterpieces, a driveway curved through landscaping that probably cost more than most people's houses, and the mansion itself looked like something from a magazine about how the other half lived. Sofia felt underdressed in her best interview outfit, a simple black dress from a thrift store, and flats that had seen better days but were her most professional shoes. Mrs. Pemberton met her at the front door, all crisp efficiency and carefully modulated concern. As they walked through rooms that seemed more like museum displays than living spaces, Sofia listened to the situation with growing understanding. "They simply refused to eat," Mrs. Pemberton was explaining as they passed a formal dining room with a table that could seat 20. 4 years old and clever enough to outwit 3 professional caregivers with advanced degrees. Mr. Ashford is at his wit's end. The previous nannies tried behavioral modification reward systems, even consulting with pediatric psychiatrists. Nothing has made any meaningful impact. Through the kitchen window, Sofia spotted them, 2 tiny figures with dark hair and solemn faces sitting perfectly still on an elaborate swing set. Her heart clenched with recognition. She'd seen that particular kind of stillness before, that careful way children held themselves when the world had become too much to bear. It was the same way her nephew had looked after his father deployed overseas, the same way Mia had sat for weeks after Sofia's mother passed away. "What did they enjoy doing before?" Sofia asked, still watching the motionless children. "Before they lost their mother." Mrs. Pemberton paused, clearly surprised by the question. Most interviews focused on credentials and disciplinary techniques. Well, according to Mr. Ashford, they used to help their mother in the kitchen quite frequently. Mrs. Ashford was apparently quite passionate about cooking and baking, but that was before, of course. Sofia nodded slowly, pieces of understanding beginning to form a pattern. "And no one's tried cooking with them since the funeral?" "Oh, heavens, no. Far too messy and potentially dangerous. 4-year-olds in a kitchen with sharp knives and hot surfaces. The liability alone would be staggering. Not to mention the chaos they'd create with flour and eggs everywhere." "Mrs. Martinez," a deep voice interrupted their conversation. Sofia turned to see Alexander Ashford himself, tall, impeccably dressed in an expensive suit, despite the obvious exhaustion evident in his dark eyes and the tight lines around his mouth. Even grief-stricken and overwhelmed, he commanded the room with the kind of quiet authority that built empires and changed industries. "Mr. Ashford," Sophia extended her hand, noting how his handshake was firm, but brief, professional, yet distracted. Thank you for taking the time to see me. Mrs. Pemberton tells me you're interested in the position, despite the unique challenges involved. Sophia chose her words carefully, sensing this was a man who appreciated directness, but had been disappointed too many times to trust easily. I've read about the situation with Lily and Logan. I'm very sorry for your loss, Mr. Ashford. Losing a parent is devastating for children, especially at such a young age. Alex's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The three previous nannies all had extensive experience with childhood trauma and developmental psychology. Advanced degrees, stellar references, years of specialized training. What makes you think you can succeed where they've failed so completely? It was a fair question, and Sophia knew her answer would determine whether she got the job or joined the ranks of well-meaning but ineffective caregivers. She looked out the window again at the motionless children, thinking about her own experiences with grief and loss. Maybe precisely because I don't have all those degrees and credentials, she said finally. Maybe because I'm not trying to be a replacement for what they lost or a solution to their problem. Sometimes children don't need another expert telling them how they should feel or behave. Sometimes they just need someone willing to sit with them exactly where they are without trying to fix them or rush their process. Alex studied her for a long moment, clearly weighing her words against months of professional failures. They haven't eaten a proper meal in weeks, Mrs. Martinez. The doctors are genuinely concerned about malnutrition and the potential need for medical intervention. This isn't a philosophical exercise in child psychology, it's a matter of their physical survival. Of course, Sophia agreed. But before we can address what they won't eat, maybe we need to understand why they won't eat. What was their favorite food? What did they love to make with their mother? Alex's expression softened slightly, the businessman's mask slipping to reveal something more vulnerable underneath. Grace made these elaborate birthday cakes, 3 layers rainbow frosting that took hours to perfect. The twins would help her mix the batter, crack the eggs, measure ingredients. They made enormous messes every single time. He paused, lost in memory. Grace always said the mess was the most important part, that you couldn't make something truly delicious without getting a little chaos involved. Sophia felt the first stirring of an idea, simple but potentially revolutionary. Well then, Mr. Ashford, maybe it's time to make a mess again. Sophia's first day was a disaster by every conventional standard of professional childcare, and it was absolutely perfect. She didn't arrive with color-coded meal plans, behavioral charts, or any of the clinical tools that had failed so spectacularly before her. Instead, she brought a battered wooden recipe box that had belonged to her grandmother, its corners worn smooth by decades of loving use, and set it on the pristine granite kitchen counter, while Lily and Logan watched suspiciously from their perch on the living room couch. "Good morning, beautiful people," she said cheerfully, not pushing for eye contact or verbal responses, having learned from her own daughter that grieving children needed space to approach on their own terms. "I was thinking about making something fun today. Anyone here know the secret to cracking an egg without getting shells everywhere?" The twins exchanged glances, but remained silent, though Sophia noticed Logan's head tilt slightly, the first sign of curiosity she'd seen from either child. Sophia continued unpacking her supplies with deliberate casualness: flour in a mason jar, real vanilla extract in a small brown bottle, sugar that caught the morning light streaming through the massive windows. "My abuela taught me to bake when I was about your age. I was absolutely terrible at it in the beginning. Got eggshells in everything, spilled flour all over her clean floors, once accidentally used salt instead of sugar, and made the most disgusting cookies in history." She chuckled at the memory. But somehow, even the disasters always tasted better when they were made with love and a little chaos. Still no verbal response, but Logan had definitely shifted position, angling himself to get a better view of her activities. "I thought maybe we could try making a cake today. Nothing fancy or complicated, just a simple vanilla cake like my grandmother used to make. But here's the thing." Sophia lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "I might need some help. I've never baked in a kitchen this fancy before with all these buttons and gadgets and professional grade equipment. I might accidentally turn on the garbage disposal instead of the mixer and create a complete disaster. Lily made a small sound, not quite a giggle, but almost quickly suppressed, as if she'd forgotten she wasn't supposed to find things amusing anymore. Sophia pretended not to notice, continuing her preparation with theatrical incompetence. Okay, well, I'm going to start this adventure. If anyone wants to join me, they're absolutely welcome. If not, that's completely fine too. Sometimes the best cooking happens when people are ready to cook, not when they're forced to. She began measuring flour with exaggerated care, deliberately letting a small cloud of white powder drift onto the previously spotless countertop. In the reflection of the stainless steel refrigerator, she could see both twins creeping closer, drawn by curiosity, despite their determination to remain disconnected. "Oh no," Sophia said with dramatic dismay as she attempted to crack an egg one-handed. "I think I got some shell pieces in there. I'm really terrible at the egg part of baking. It's like the eggs know I'm nervous and they rebel against me. You have to tap it on something flat first, then use your thumbs to pull it apart in 2 quick motions," came a small tentative voice. Sophia turned to find Logan standing at the very edge of the kitchen, still maintaining what he probably considered a safe distance, but clearly engaged despite himself. His voice was rusty from disuse, but there was knowledge in it, muscle memory from happier times. "Really? That sounds like expert technique. Could you show me?" Logan hesitated for several long seconds, clearly torn between his desire to help and his commitment to emotional withdrawal. Finally, he stepped forward with the careful precision of a 4-year-old who had been taught proper procedures. He demonstrated the egg-cracking technique his mother had patiently taught him, his small hands moving with surprising confidence and skill. "That's absolutely perfect. You're clearly a natural baker with excellent training. Would you like to help with the rest of this project?" Before Logan could answer, Lily appeared beside him, like a shadow having crept forward during the egg demonstration. "Mommy always said 2 firm taps, then pull apart fast so the shell doesn't have time to break into pieces," she whispered, her voice barely audible, but filled with the authority of remembered lessons. "Your mommy was obviously very smart and an excellent teacher," Sophia said gently, her heart breaking a little at how desperately these children needed to share their mother's wisdom. "Should we follow her methods for the rest of this cake?" What followed was the most beautiful chaos the Ashford kitchen had probably ever witnessed. The twins, tentative at first, but growing bolder with each successful step, helped measure ingredients with the serious concentration of professional bakers. Flour ended up on their clothes, the counter, and somehow in Lily's hair. Logan insisted on stirring the batter exactly 7 times clockwise, then 7 times the other way, because that's how Mommy had taught them. They tasted everything vanilla extract that made them scrunch their faces, raw batter that earned approving nods, sugar that disappeared more quickly than it made it into the mixing bowl. "Mommy always let us lick the mixing spoons," Lily confided, eyeing the bowl hopefully as Sophia scraped batter into the prepared pan. "Well, that sounds like a very important family tradition that should definitely be honored," Sophia replied, producing 2 wooden spoons, "but only after we get our beautiful cake safely into the oven." For the first time in months, the kitchen filled with sounds other than arguments and coaxing genuine laughter as Logan got batter on his nose, excited chatter as they discussed proper mixing techniques and the comfortable rhythm of people working together toward a common goal. None of them noticed Alex standing frozen in the doorway, his forgotten phone clutched in his hand, staring in absolute amazement at his children, laughing, talking, engaged, alive for the first time since Grace's funeral. When the timer rang 40 minutes later, announcing that their creation was ready, the twins were practically vibrating with anticipation. They'd spent the baking time in productive chaos, cleaning up spills, mostly setting the dining table with careful precision, and regaling Sophia with detailed stories about their mother's legendary baking adventures that had clearly been treasured memories. "She made a 3-story castle cake for our 3rd birthday," Logan said, his eyes bright with recollection for the first time in months. with real towers and a drawbridge that actually moved up and down. It took her 2 whole days to build it, and she let us eat it for breakfast the next morning because it was too beautiful to save for dessert. Lily added, her voice growing stronger with each shared memory. Daddy said cake wasn't proper breakfast food, but Mommy said special celebration cakes were absolutely special breakfast food, and that was final. Sophia glanced toward the doorway, where Alex had been hovering intermittently, pretending to handle urgent business calls while actually listening to every single word his children spoke. He disappeared again, probably pulled away by some corporate crisis that couldn't wait. But she'd caught the expression on his face during those brief moments. Wonder, mixed with profound pain, hope struggling against the fear of another devastating disappointment. "Well," Sophia said carefully, removing the golden cake from the professional-grade oven. "This certainly smells like it might qualify as special celebration cake material. What's the expert opinion from our head bakers?" The twins approached their creation with the serious analytical expressions of professional pastry chefs evaluating a masterpiece. It wasn't perfect by magazine standards, slightly lopsided on one side, perhaps a touch too brown around the edges, but it was entirely theirs, created with their own hands and filled with their own stories. "Can we eat it right now?" Lily asked, then immediately caught herself as if she'd forgotten that asking for food had become foreign territory over the past months. "Absolutely we can," Sophia said firmly. "But first I think this cake is calling out for some decoration. I have a feeling it needs rainbow frosting just like your mommy used to make. What do you think?" 20 minutes later, they sat around the kitchen table with thick, generous slices of slightly imperfect vanilla cake covered in swirls of colorful homemade frosting that looked exactly like happiness should look. Sophia watched with carefully controlled emotion as both children picked up their forks and took their first real bites of food in weeks. Logan said, his mouth full of cake and wonder. "It tastes like love." Lily finished softly, taking another bite with growing confidence. "It tastes like Mommy's love, but different. Like our love, too." That was the precise moment when Alex walked into the kitchen and stopped dead in his tracks. He stood frozen in the doorway, briefcase forgotten in his hand, staring at a sight he'd begun to believe he'd never witness again, his children actually eating rainbow frosting smeared across their cheeks, chattering enthusiastically about baking techniques and flavor combinations and plans for tomorrow's culinary adventures. Sophia looked up at him, flowers still dusting her dark hair like powdered sugar, and offered a smile that seemed to contain all the hope he'd lost. "Would you like some cake, Mr. Ashford? The head bakers here have assured me it qualifies as special celebration food suitable for any meal." Alex's throat worked silently as he really looked at his children for the first time in months. They weren't the hollow-eyed, silent ghosts who had been haunting his house like living reminders of everything he'd failed to protect. They were kids again, messy, happy, gloriously alive kids with frosting under their fingernails and genuine smiles on their faces. "Daddy, you have to try it." Lily held up a fork loaded with cake and rainbow frosting. "We made it ourselves with Sophia's help. It's almost as good as Mommy's, but different good, not same good." Alex sat down slowly at his own kitchen table, a piece of furniture he'd avoided for months because it held too many memories of family dinners and homework sessions and ordinary moments that had become unbearably precious. He accepted the fork with hands that trembled slightly, taking a bite of imperfect cake that tasted like miracles. "It's absolutely perfect," he said, his voice rough with emotions he'd been holding back since the funeral. "Sophia says we can make chocolate chip cookies tomorrow," Logan announced between bites, his enthusiasm building with each word. "The kind Mommy used to make for our movie nights with extra chocolate chips, because that's the most important part." Alex looked at Sophia across his children's heads, his eyes bright with tears he'd forgotten how to shed. "Thank you," he mouthed silently, the words carrying months of desperation and gratitude. She just nodded, understanding that sometimes the most profound healing happens not through complex interventions or professional techniques, but through creating space for joy to return naturally in its own time, through the simple act of making something beautiful together. 6 months later, the Ashford kitchen bore no resemblance to the sterile, unused showcase it had once been. Flower handprints decorated the lower cabinets like badges of honor. A constantly rotating gallery of the twins' culinary masterpieces covered the refrigerator, and the sound of laughter at mealtimes had become as regular as sunrise. Sophia had evolved far beyond the title of nanny. She had become the heart of a family that had learned to beat again. She'd moved into the guest house with her daughter Mia, who had quickly become the twins' adored honorary big sister and co-conspirator in all manner of kitchen adventures. The blended household worked with an ease that surprised everyone, especially Alex, who had forgotten that families could be created as well as born. "Daddy, watch this," Lily called from her position at the kitchen island. Carefully measuring flour for their latest ambitious project, cinnamon rolls, because Logan had declared that swirly bread with sugar was essential for proper Sunday mornings. Alex had restructured his entire work life around these moments, scheduling meetings around baking time, and discovering that the world didn't end when he prioritized frosting over profit margins. He'd also learned that a little chaos was a small price to pay for the sound of his children's voices filling his home. "What did those first 3 nannies do wrong?" he asked Sophia one evening as they watched the children play an elaborate game of restaurant in the backyard with Mia as the head chef and the twins as demanding but appreciative customers. "Nothing wrong exactly," Sophia replied thoughtfully, choosing her words with the careful precision of someone who understood the weight they carried. They tried to solve the hunger strike as if it were a behavioral problem to be fixed rather than an expression of grief that needed to be honored. Lily and Logan weren't just refusing food, they were refusing to participate in a world that had become unrecognizable without their mother. Forcing them to eat without addressing the emotional component would have been like putting a bandage on a broken heart. And baking together somehow healed the broken heart. It honored Grace's memory while creating new joy, Sophia explained. It allowed them to connect with happy memories of their mother instead of only the painful ones. When children help create their own food, they become emotionally invested in consuming it. But more importantly, they were able to remember their mother through love and laughter instead of just loss and emptiness. Alex nodded, watching Logan demonstrate proper dough kneading technique to his appreciative audience. "You gave them permission to be happy again without forgetting her." "I gave them permission to be children again," Sophia corrected gently. "The happiness was their choice, their healing, their timeline. I just provided the flour and the safe space." That night, during their established bedtime routine, Lily looked up at Alex with a serious expression that meant important questions were coming. "Daddy, do you think Mommy would be proud of our baking skills?" "I think she would be amazed and delighted," Alex said, smoothing her hair back from her face. "And I think she'd be especially happy knowing that you and Logan are taking such good care of each other and teaching Mia and me how to be better bakers. Sophia says when we cook together, it's like having a little piece of Mommy with us in the kitchen," Lily said sleepily, "because the most important ingredient in any recipe is love, and Mommy's love is still here even if she can't stir the batter anymore." Alex's chest tightened with overwhelming gratitude for Sophia's wisdom, for his children's resilience, for the simple miracle of bedtime conversations and full bellies, and a house that echoed with laughter instead of silence. Later, as he stood in the doorway, watching Sophia help the twins with their final kitchen cleanup of the day, Alex realized something profound about the nature of healing and hope. Sometimes the solution to life's most devastating problems isn't found in complexity or expertise or expensive interventions. Sometimes it's discovered in the revolutionary simplicity of flour and eggs and the courage to make a beautiful mess together. 3 highly qualified professionals had failed because they'd approached his children as problems to be solved rather than hearts to be understood. Sophia had succeeded because she'd recognized that healing happens best when it's mixed with patience, seasoned with understanding, and served with the unshakable faith that love in all its forms always finds a way to nourish what matters most. What simple act of love has made the biggest difference in your life? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe for more reminders that the most powerful healing often comes from the most unexpected places. Thank you for being part of our community, where love always wins.